going to begin in Mirz Hashem, the second parak of Masechet Yoma on Daf Chaf Beis. In the last Mishnah, we learned about Trumas Hadeshen, that every day they would be Torem the Deshen, which means that they began the day in the Beis HaMikdash on a daily basis when the Kohen, one specific Kohen, we'll see which one, would take the Machta, and it was made out of kesef. He would go up to the Mizbeach, the outer Mizbeach, and there he would separate the gecholim from this side to that side, and he would take some of the ashes from inside between these gecholim, and he would go down the Mizbeach. When he got to the Ritzpas HaZorah, then he would walk 10 amos to the east of the Kevesh HaMizbeach, and there he would leave the Deshen at a distance of 3 tfachim from the Kevesh. Our Mishnah is going to explain how we determine which Kohen should be blessed, should be merited with the responsibility and the avoda of the Trumas Hadeshet. Barishona, initially, Kol Misha Rotze Litrom Es HaMizbeach Torem. At the beginning, it was what you call first come, first serve. And whichever Kohen got there first, it was very early in the morning, so he was very motivated. He would be the one to be Torem Es Hadeshet. But Ubizman Shei Merubim, what happens if there are many Kohanim who are vying for the special honor of this avoda of Trumas Hadeshen, to take out the ashes? Is then Hayrotzin the Olim Bakevish. There would be a race up the ramp, and call it Koda Michavero Eschavero Be'arba Amos, on the 4 amos on the top of the kevesh. Whoever got there to that first to that 4 amos, zacha, he could be toreh. V'im hoyu shneim, what happens if 2 kohanim run up and they both arrive at that 4 amos area at the same time, shavim, simultaneously? Then we have no choice but to do a gorol, a lottery. Hamimuna, there was one person whose job it was to oversee the gorolos. Omer lahem, he would say to all the Kohanim that he found in that proximity that were vying to get this Trumas Hadeshen, Hatzbiu, lift up a finger. And what he would do is, the Mamuna would choose a number in his mind, a higher number. He would have a group of Kohanim who are sort of surrounding him in a circle. Each one has a finger up, and he would count 1 finger, 1 finger, 1 Kohen, 1 Kohen, 1 Kohen, until he got to that magic number. And when he got to that number, that is the Kohen who would be Zocher in the Avodah of Trumas Hadeshen. It's a little bit similar, reminiscent of the game we used to play as a child, as children, called musical chairs. You know, as soon as the music stops, who's the one who's sitting, who's the one who's standing? Umahem Motziin. Now here we have a problem of swindlers, because sometimes the swindlers would put out their thumb in addition to another finger when they saw that the Mamuna was about to count 1 more, and they were going to get cut out. So they put up a thumb in addition to the finger, whatever finger they put out, and they were trying to fool the Mamuna into thinking that there were 2 Kohanim there, because the Mamuna wasn't focused on the heads, he was focused on the fingers. Achas o Stein, but ein motziim agudol b'migdash. It would be okay if the Kohen would put out 2 fingers that are contiguous one to the other. They would clearly be noticed by the Memuna as 1 person, 1 Kohen, but not the Agudol. The Agudol, the thumb, is separated from the other fingers. So it's possible to fool the Memuna into thinking that he should count, in addition to these fingers, he should count the thumb as well. Maisa Hayu. Now, all this went on until a terrible story took place. Somebody broke a leg, and Shneim Shavim V'rotzim Ola B'Kevesh. There were two Kohanim that were running up the ramp in order to be Zoche in this Avod of Trumas Hadeshen. V'dochaf Echad Mehem Es Chavero, and on his way up, he gave a little push to his friend, and his friend Nofal fell off the Kevesh, and Nishbar Raglo, he broke his leg. Kevan Sharo Bezdin Shaboim Lidei Sakana. This is getting out of hand. It's very dangerous. His kinu shaloyu tarmim es hamizbeach ella b'fayis. That there was no such thing as any Kohen being zoche in the avoda of the Trumas Hadeshen unless he participated in a gorol, in a lottery. And apparently the lottery would involve that the Kohen would wait online, those who were there and showed up in the Mikdash so early in the morning, and they would have to put out their finger, and as we said before, the Memuna would count the fingers. Arba Paisos Hayusham. Now this part of the Mishnah is going to occupy us almost for the entire parak. That's not going to be our focus for today, but this is almost an introduction to the next 10 blot Gemara, that there were 4 Paisos that took place daily in the Beis HaMikdash, v'zeh ha'pais harishon, and the Trumas Hadeshen was the first of the 4. The Gemara asks, "V'ha meikara my time alot tekinu le'rabbanan piyasa." Why did Chazal think very comfortably and calmly initially that there was no need for the gorol? And the Gemara answers, meikara summer, the Chachamim thought initially, and it was a mistake in judging the Kohanim, that came into Trumas Halishka Avodas Lailahi, that since the Trumas Halishka, the Trumas Hadeshen, I said, is an avodah that takes place at night, although technically it's not exactly the middle of the night, but rather it is before daybreak, it's even before Alos HaShachar, is therefore lo chashiva lahu v'lo asu. The Chachamim made a psychological assumption that the people, the Kohanim, would not be so motivated to fight over the service of the Trumas Hadeshen, which is a night service. But came in the Chazu de Kasu, and to their surprise, the Chacham realized, hey, they're coming in mass and they're fighting over it. Is therefore they realized that this could be a very dangerous operation, and therefore they instituted the gorol of counting the fingers that we mentioned before. The Gemara asks the following question: we'll see that with regard to the Haktorah of the Murim, that means the Varim and the Chalavim of the carbon Tamid on the Mizbeach, initially, from the get-go, the Rabbanan instituted a lottery. Even though this is an Avodas Laila, meaning all the Avarim and the Chalavim of the carbon Tamid could be burnt overnight. So we see that it's clear the Chacham understood that in the eyes of the Kohanim, even an Avodas Laila is very chashuv, is very important, and therefore there's going to be a battle here, a contention, a competition over who gets to do this avodas laila of Avarim u'ptarim, the Haktorah of the Avarim of the Karban Tamid, and therefore they initially, even from the get-go, they instituted a pious, a lottery. So what's the difference now, asks the Gemara, in the initial thinking of the Chachamim between Avarim u'ptarim, where they instituted a pious, as opposed to Trumas Hadeshen, where they didn't institute a pious? So the Gemara answers, Sof avoda diyamamahi. That Tekina Rabbanan Paisa, the reason why the Rabbanan instituted a pious, and they realized from the get-go that there would be a great interest and eagerness on the part of the Kohanim to possibly be zoche in the Haktorah Seivarim v'Chalavim, is because this is considered the end, the culmination of the Avodas Yom. In other words, the Shechita of the Karban Tamid, followed by the Zrika of its Dam, which only take place by day. But as far as the Haktorah of those Emurim of the Tamid Shal Yom, that could be brought at night. So in the minds of the Kohanim, this is something very chashuv, to be able to finish the avoda of the Korban Tamid that began by day. That was where they were contending. So the Gemara asks, "Hi Nami, let's go to Trumas Hadeshen." Even though it was at night, Chilas Avoda the Yoma, it is the initiation of the avoda of the daytime. We're going to prove this from a statement of Rabbi Yochanan. In other words, just like a varim uptarim is the culmination of the avodas yom, the spillover into the night after the yom, so too the Trumas Hadeshen, on the other end of the spectrum, is the introduction to the avodas yom. And what did Rabbi Yochanan say? The Amar Rabbi Yochanan Kidesh Yodov le Trumas Hadeshen le Machar ain't Sarach le Kadesh Kvar Kidesh Mitchilas Avoda. Normally, if the Kohen wants to do the avoda, he must. It's an absolute critical requirement to Mekadesh Yodav Aragel from the Kiyah. But that which he did yesterday could not be meaningful for tomorrow. Or vice versa. Every day requires its own individual Kiddush Yadayim Raglaim. And yet Rabbi Yochanan says that if he was Mekadesh Yodav Aragel for Trumas Hadeshen during the nighttime, then when he gets to the next day, he doesn't need a Kiddush Yadayim Raglaim, because the fact that we're separating night and day is not the final determining criterion, but rather it depends on the avoda. The Kiddush Yadayim Raglaim is connected to the avoda, and the Trumas Hadeshen is considered the beginning of the avodas yom. Now it's true that if you look in Masechet Zvachim on Daf Yutes, you'll find that Rebbe says there's a psul lina in Kiddush Yadayim Raglaim, although that's Gzeira D'Rabbanan, but the Rabbanan were worried that people should not be mezalzel in a psul lina, means when kodshim was left overnight, they become possible. And in the case of Kiddush Yadayim Raglaim, they made a Gzeira that what you did yesterday is not valid and meaningful for what's going to go on today. But yet, even Rebbe would agree, so argues Rabbi Yochanan, that if he was Mekadesh Yodav Raglov at night for the sake of Trumas Hadeshen, he doesn't need another Kiddush Yadayim Raglaim in the following morning. And the reason for that is everybody sees, it's clear to the spectator that he was Mekadesh Yodav Raglov. No one's going to come to be Mezalzel and think that we don't have to take reckoning of the psul of lina. They'll understand that this case is different because, as Rabbi Yochanan pointed out, Trumas Hadeshen is Tchilas Avodas Hayom. He's beginning to start the Avodas Hayom, and therefore the Gemara is asking, just like in Aktaras Eivarim and Pedarim, we said that it's Chashuva Eitzel Hakon, and they're eager to get it because it's the culmination of the Avodas Hayom. Trumas Hadeshen is also chashuv in their minds because it is the initiation, the kickoff of the Avodas Hayom. So therefore, we're again stuck with a question: why did the Chacham think initially that there would be no competition and there's no need for a gorol, a bias? And the Gemara answers, no. You misunderstood Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan, when he said that they didn't make a Gzeres Chachamim or psul lina in the case of Kiddush Yadayim Raglaim with Trumas Hadeshen, that's for a different reason. That's because Ema Shekvar Kidesh Mitchila Le'avoda. And what the Gemara is arguing now is that the Trumas Hadeshen is already considered a Tchilas Avoda of the day. In other words, even though the implementation of Trumas Hadeshen actually takes place at night, but it's very close to the Avoda of the day, and the amount of time that has to elapse between Trumas Hadeshen and Alos HaShachar, the kickoff of the day, is a very, very short period of time. And therefore, it's obvious that this is considered, when he does the Kiddush Yadayim Raglaim for the Trumas Hadeshen, it is a Kiddush for the day itself, because it's implemented immediately before the day starts. And therefore, he doesn't need another Kiddush Yadayim Raglaim after Alos HaShachar 5 minutes later. Ika Diamri. Now the Gemara comes up with a different thesis to try to explain why initially the Chachamim felt no need to establish a gorol for the Trumas Hadeshen. The Karasavar, initially they were of the opinion that you know why the Kohanim are not going to line up and fight over the Trumas Hadeshen? Ema the Ika Ones Shena. Once a person goes to sleep for the night, it's very difficult for him to get out of bed in the morning. And it's not even morning, it's before what we call Alos HaShachar. It's the moment of Kriyas HaGever, right? When the rooster cockle-doodle-doo, or when they woke him up, and it's before Alos HaShachar. Leave me alone. I'm asleep. And he's going to turn over to the other side. Lo asu, the Kohanim are not going to come on mass to desire this chus in the Azara of being Merim the Deshen. So that's called Ones Sheno. Once a person's asleep, to wake him up in the middle of the night is very difficult. However, the Chachamim were caught by surprise. Eva the Chazu, the Asu. He says they realized that the Kohanim are okay with overcoming that Ones Shena, waking up before Alos HaShachar with Krus HaGever, and they were lining up there waiting who would get the rights to be Makayim, the mitzvah of Trumas Hadeshen. Since they became aware, the Chachamim, that now people are coming on mass, and it could come to a situation of danger, therefore, they instituted the pious for the Trumas Hadeshen. So the Gemara now asks, you're talking about being maktir, the emurim, the varm, and the ptarim in the middle of the night. I mean, that's also on a shin. During the entire night, you could be maktir these emurim, so that at 3 a.m, they need the Kohanim to be maktir, and the Kohanim are going to go back to sleep. And yet, with regard to Evarim, initially from the get-go, the Chachamim anticipated that there's going to be a mad rush for this schus of doing the Aktar of the Evarim Tarim, and therefore they instituted a gorol from the get-go, a pious from the get-go. There are two situations. There's one situation when you're already awake and you push yourself and you push yourself and you stay awake even way past your bedtime. There's another situation where you're already in bed and you're sleeping and you need desperately to sleep, and now you have to wake up out of your sleep. The latter, is much more challenging. So the Chacham understood that with the case of Evar and the Kohanim were pushing themselves to stay awake even as late as 3 a.m. in order to be zocha in this avod of the Torah. But with regard to the Trumas Hadeshen, the Chachamim did not anticipate that there would be such interest and desire to be zocha in this mitzvah of Trumas Hadeshen, because Onet Shena means make him. Make him means to wake up when you're in a deep sleep. Now the Gemara asks the following kasha: V'takanta lahai gisa havi. Was this takana to establish a pious for Trumas Hadeshen? Was it really a result, as the Mishnah seems to record it, of that terrible situation where one coin pushed the other coin and he broke his leg? Gemara says, Takanto lahai gisahav. No. I'm going to prove to you from a brisa that the reason why the Chacham stood up at one point and established this takana of pious is for a different reason entirely. The Sanya, we learned in the brisa, Misha zacha betrumas hadeshen, zacha b'sidr amarocha, ube shnei gizrei eitzim. What happens is that there are 3 different avodos. All are implemented on the Mizbeach with regard to the Mizbeach, to prepare the Mizbeach. And it was 3 for 1, meaning that they integrated all 3 avodos into one. And if you got one, you got all 3. And this was Trumas Hadeshen, to clear off the ashes from the Mizbeach. Number 2, to set up the eitzim, the wood on the Mizbech. Number three, there were Shnei Gizrei Eitzim. There were two very thick logs of wood that were placed on top of the Maracha in event that they might need extra Eitzim. And all these three avodos, if you got one, you get all three. It was three for the price of one. And therefore, Gemara says the following. Since at the beginning, before they made the takon of Payis on Trumas Hadeshin, there was already one Kohen who would be Toremes Hadeshin, and therefore he would have rights to be Masad of the Maracha and to give the two, place the two Gizrei Eitzim. So he would get all of these Avodas Chashuvas. Once he took hold of the Trumas Hadeshin, then he got all three. So therefore, even before the dangerous situation that arose and came to the awareness of the Chachamim, when one Kohen pushed the other Kohen, even before that, the Rabbanah needed to establish a takon of Payis. It's not because of that event that happened, that tragic event, but rather because of the fact that without Payis, the Kohanim are going to fight over the Trumas Hadeshin because it's part and parcel of a threefold avodah. And once you get one, you get all. Rav Ashi now wants to explain why at the beginning there was no need for the takon of Payis for Trumas Hadeshin. And the reason is because the Kohen who was Torem would not get rights to be Masad of the Maracha and the Shnei Gizrei Eitzim. There were Shnei takonos on it. Meikar initially, before there were any takonos whatsoever. So that's at stage pre-1, so to speak, pre-1A, we'll call it. Is several also the Chacham thought that the Kohanim were not going to show up, either because of, as we said before, they didn't think it was so chashuv to do this avodas laila, or because they were in the middle of their sleep and they had own shena. There was no takon of pais, but came in the chazaka. See, now the Rabbanan saw that they're fighting over it. V'asuli de sakana, nami de sakana, kinule pais. Oh, once they established a pais, now they have a problem. Why? Keva the kinule pais lo also. The message of the pais, in a sense, was, you know what? I'm going to stay in bed. What chances are that I'll win the lottery? Like in Israel, you have mifal pais. So there's some people wait on long to buy a pais, and other people say, well, it's one in who knows what chance that I'll win the pais. I won't even bother buying a pais. So came in the kinule paisalo. I see they stayed in bed because what are the chances I'll win the lottery? So therefore, Amri, the Kohanim said, "Mi yemer de misramelon." Well, why does it pay to join the lottery? What are the chances of that? We'll win the lottery. What's not worth all the tercha on a suffix situation that maybe they'll win the lottery? So now you couldn't even find a single volunteer for Trumas Hadesh. The Kohanim stayed sleeping. Hadat kinule. Now they have the second takon. And what was the second takon? Misha zacha b'Trumas Hadeshin. If you won the lottery, Yizke, you would also get the rights for Seder Marach and Shnei Gizrei Eitzim. Ki hefi denesu v'nis paisu. Now the Kohen made a calculation, and it's worth pushing myself. I'm going to join the pais. Why? Because it's worth it. It's worth it to push myself even on the outside chance that that maybe I'll win the pais, but it's worth it because if I win the pais, I get 3 for the price of 1. I get Trumas Hadeshin. I get Sinas Ha'etzim al Gabi Maracha, and the Sinas Shnei Gizrei. The Mishnah says, Bisman Shem Merubin. When there are many Kohanim, they run up to the Kevesh, and whoever gets there within the Dalet Amos first, he gets the Trumas Hadeshin. Omer Rav Papa. And now the Gemara is going to introduce a suffix of Rav Papa. First, the Gemara clears the pathway. Pshitali, I understand without question that Arba Amos the Ara Lo. That when the Mishnah speaks about who gets to the first 4 Amos first, it's not referring to the 4 Amos on the Ritzpas HaZorah before you go up the Kevesh. Because let's look at the Mishnah. The Mishnah says Ratzin V'olim B'Kevesh. Apparently, the Mishnah means they were running up the Kevesh, and who would get to the 4 amos first? If it's the 4 amos before you get onto the Kevesh, then you didn't need Ratzin V'olim. Is therefore Tanan in the Mishnah, it's clear Kamaisa that we must be talking about 4 amos on the Kevesh itself. And now Rav Papa says that you might entertain the possibility that it means the first 4 amos of the Kevesh going up. Namilo, that's impossible. That can't be shot in the Mishnah because it says Ratzin V'olim B'Kevesh. If it's the first 4 amos as you enter to the Kevesh, then it wouldn't be Olim. It wouldn't be that you're going up the Kevesh. And V'hodar, and then it says in the Mishnah, Kol HaKodem Es Chavero, whoever gets there first 4 amos. That's it. Now he excludes another possibility, Beini Ubeini. Maybe somewhere on the upswing, the slant of the Kevesh, somewhere in the middle there's a 4 amos. Namilo, that can't be pshat. The lo Messiah milsa. Because there's no way that you can identify these 4 amos on the Kevesh. There's no marking or significance to any set of 4 amos on the Kevesh itself. And therefore, the final conclusion of stage 1 of Rav Papa, which is the pshitoli, is that the Gabi Mizbeach Tan, that we're talking on top of the Mizbeach. When you get to the top of the Kevesh, and now you're at the Mizbeach, it's the first 4 amos of the Mizbeach. That's called the Arba Amos Birosho Shel HaKevesh. When you get to the top of the Kevesh, those 4 amos. Oh. Now we get to the suffix of Rav Papa. All this was an introduction to the suffix of Rav Papa. Now, as a little bit of background, the Mizbeach is like a pyramid going up, meaning it's wider at the bottom and narrower as you get to the top. On the bottom, on the floor of the Ritzpah, the Mizbeach is actually 32 amas square. And then there's something called a Yesod, which means for an amma of width, they built a base around the Mizbeach. So now the Mizbeach, once you go into the Yesod, it's only 30 amos by 30 amos. Now, when you climb up another 5 amos, then in the middle of the Mizbeach, there's something called a sovev. A sovev means it goes around, and this is where the Kohanim were able to walk around on this ama's thickness platform, so to speak, that was 5 amos above the Yesod. Now, the size or the area of the Mizbeach is now 28 amos by 28 amos. Boy, Rav Papa wants to know the following. Arba amos sha'omru. When the Mishnah says that whoever gets there first in the 4 amos, he's zoche the Trumas Hadeshen, does it mean A or B? Is it A, behadei ama yisod the ama sovev? And now we'll just read the other suffix here on top of Chav Beis and Beis. O Dilma bar me ama yisod the ama sovev. Now, what I have here in the Masechet is very helpful. It's a bit of a diagram, so that's good for me. But I think we could explain it even without the diagram. And that is the following. When you talk about the top 4 amos of the Kevesh, which the Mishnah says that's where you're zocha in the pious, so the question is, where do you begin calculating those 4 amos as you climb up the Kevesh? One way is to say it, which is called Arba Amos. We'll start with the second possibility, Bar Me Ama Yesod the Ama Sovev, which means that you draw a line that would be parallel down to the Yesod, and then you move up that line, and then when you get to the top of the Kevesh, you move towards the left. So what you're going to do is, in effect, you're going to subtract the two amos, one of the Yesod and one of the Sovev. So you'll end up at a point before you actually get to the top of the Mizbeach. The other side in the Gemara is to say Arba Amos behadei Ama Yesod v'Ama Sovev. In other words, you begin calculating the 4 amos on the top of the kevesh from the point that if you draw a straight line down, you'll hit the mizbeach itself, meaning you're not going to calculate the amma of the yesod nor the amma of the sovev. Teku, the Gemara ends up with this stuff.